Shalom. So in this week, in which we are observing Shavuot, the anniversary of the Sinai revelation and the giving of the Torah, in this very week we are also reading Parashat Naso. You know that there is a great similarity between the Sinai revelation, what took place there, and a wedding. And many of the holy books point out the metaphor of the people of Israel standing under the chuppah of Mount Sinai, as we're taught that God held the mountain over our heads like a chuppah. The Torah itself, which we received, is like the marriage contract, the ketubah, and everything that took place at Mount Sinai, this union of God and the Jewish people, is really like a wedding. And so too, in a way, this theme of this wedding that took place this very week at Sinai, when we were joined together with the Almighty through the Torah, in a way like this motif of man and wife, which we actually find discussed quite a number of times and alluded to in the Torah itself. The theme really continues in Parashat Naso as well. We have here in chapter 7 of this week's Torah portion, beginning the verse, Vayihi biyom kalot Moshe lahakim et hamishkan, which means it was on the day that Moshe finished establishing the tabernacle. This word kalot, finished, it's actually very similar to the word kala, which means a bride, and it's the same root. And our sages make a play on words, and they say, what does it mean it was on the day that Moshe finished erecting the tabernacle? They say it was on the day that the kala, as it says, biyom kalot Moshe lahakim et hamishkan, on the day that Moshe finished establishing the tabernacle. They say that it's an idea being expressed here. It was on the day that the kala, that the bride, stood under the bridal canopy. So here, in chapter 7 of Parashat Naso, once again we go back to Rosh Chodesh Nisan, to the day of the completion of the tabernacle, and all of the leaders of all of the tribes of Israel are bringing their offerings, and they all seem identical. It seems to be very repetitious, the portion referring to all of the offerings that are brought by the heads of the Shvatim, but the mystical sages tell us that the truth is that on a level of the completion of Hashem's name and all of the things that this represents on a cosmic grand scale, there was no repetition, but this is all part of the perfection of this home for the Shekhinah in this world. Now, if this was the wedding, really, the Sinai revelation, and also the concept of the establishment of the tabernacle also has some connotation of a wedding, the truth is, this is what we always say, that the concept of the tabernacle is really the continuation of the Sinai experience. And if, when all of nature was suspended, if the world, when it reached that state of perfection, of unity at Mount Sinai, if that was to continue, if it could continue possibly, if it did, that was certainly through the experience of coming to the tabernacle, which later became the Holy Temple, the Beit HaMikdash. All in all, the experience of coming and standing in the divine presence as it's revealed in the Mikdash is the continuation of the Sinai experience. And the truth is that this is beautifully summed up in, of all places, the Song of Songs, where at the end of chapter 3, we have the verse which is translated here with an allegorical reading, following Rashi, in chapter 3 and verse 11, "Go forth and gaze, O daughters distinguished by loyalty to God, upon the king to whom peace belongs, adorned with a crown his nation made for him, on the day his law was given, and he became one with Israel. And on the day his heart was gladdened by his tabernacle's consecration." And in Hebrew, it's biyom chatunato uviyom simchat libo, on the day of his wedding and on the day of the joy of his heart, 2 different days. And the idea being expressed here that the day of his wedding is indeed the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, which is called here the day in which he became one with Israel, and the day his heart was gladdened. Why? Through the tabernacle's consecration, because that's what gave, as it were, a foothold. That's what gave reality to God's desire to have a presence in this world. So along this motif of the wedding of Klal Yisrael, of the Jewish people and the Almighty, the question might be, who is the Chatan and who is the Kala? Who is the bride and who is the groom? Because, interestingly, the two are somewhat, the roles are exchanged. Sometimes we find that we are likened to the Chatan. Sometimes we find that we are likened to the Kala. And the sages, they emphasize there are different approaches to Torah study. It's all about Torah study. The whole idea of Shavuot is about our embracing the Torah. What is the secret of this union, the secret of this wedding? It's our connection to the Torah itself, which is like Hashem manifest in this world. How else do we cling to Him if not by clinging to His Word and by living according to His Word and making it real in this world? So when we come to the Torah and we want it to fix us, we come to the Torah and we are like, I know exactly what I am. I know what all my problems are. I am an empty vessel. I come to the Torah and I want to embrace its purity and I want to study it and I want it to fix my soul. Then the Torah has an influence over me. And then the Torah is like masculine. The Torah is like the Chatan, and I am like the Kala. I am like the feminine, ready to receive. And then the godly soul receives like the bride. But when a person is on a different level and comes to study Torah for the sake of the Torah itself, for the sake of the wisdom and the beauty of the Torah, and for the sake of being able to embody that and broadcast that into the world, then, as it were, the Torah receives, and the Torah becomes like the feminine side, and we, the masculine. But in any event, what we really see alluded to from that verse in the Song of Songs, another level of the beautiful connection between Parashat Naso and Shavuot, is that the consummation of the wedding, Yom Chatunato, Yom Simchat Libo, the day of his wedding, the day of his union with Israel, and the day of the gladness of his heart, the day of the consecration of the tabernacle. The consummation of the wedding is when the tabernacle is built. And again, because like we always say, the continuation of everything that was revealed at Mount Sinai on an everyday level in this world takes place in the tabernacle / Mikdash. And of course, what we're skirting about here, what we're alluding to, what's clear to us is that the highest level of our understanding of our relationship, at least the relationship that we're aspiring to with the Almighty, is the relationship of man and wife. We've spoken about this many times, the allegory of the Song of Songs, as we've just quoted from, that the Song of Songs indeed stands for the love relationship between man and wife. Thus, the greatest mystic sages refer to the Holy of Holies in the Holy Temple as the bedroom, because the level of perfect intimacy, of holy matrimony, holy intimacy between man and wife, is the level that Hashem would like to be with us in this world. So when we come on the background of understanding this vision of some sort of marital bliss that we're supposed to have with Hashem, based on our wedding this week, the festival of Shavuot, standing at Mount Sinai and receiving the Torah, receiving our marriage contract, and reading about the completion of the tabernacle, again this week in Parashat Naso. And then we read in this week's Parsha, beginning in chapter 7, the offerings of the tribal leaders. But again, seems like it's quite, not a little bit, but quite redundant, quite repetitious. But rest assured, trust me for the moment, there's something going on here on the deepest level, some sort of completion and perfection of some sort of tapestry of light, of a cosmic theme of the perfection of this beautiful house. And indeed, right before the tribal offerings, what did we have? We have the priestly blessings. And as if to prove that everything that I'm saying is true, the priestly blessings, which are so succinct and so beautiful and stand for so many things, Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, speak to Aaron and his son saying, so shall you bless the children of Israel, saying to them, may Hashem bless you and safeguard you. May Hashem illuminate his countenance for you and be gracious to you. May Hashem lift his countenance to you and establish peace for you. Let them place my name upon the children of Israel, and I shall bless them. In the Hebrew, this is all in the singular. Unbelievable. Unbelievable thing. Because that is showing us this very unspeakable idea of unity. That it's like one person. We become like one person through this state of love. Okay, so it's all like a very sweet, kind of beautiful, romantic notion of a life that we're striving for. And it's a life of constant attachment to Hashem and perfection in that relationship. There's only one problem. There's only one problem, and it's a serious one. What could go wrong? What could go wrong to spoil this idyllic picture of marital bliss? A roving eye, suspicion, Parashat Naso, which I very conveniently have not mentioned until now. But before this beautiful verse about it was in the day that Moshe finished establishing the tabernacle, before the offerings of the tribal leaders, we have the section of the wayward wife, the sotah. It's a very difficult parasha, very difficult law in the Torah when a man is overcome by what the Torah calls a spirit of jealousy, which passed over him. He warned his wife not to be alone with a certain man. He gets the spirit of jealousy. She denies any wrongdoing, and there was no witness. So there is a process that the Torah describes in which only if he himself, by the way, is completely innocent, otherwise it doesn't work and it can't even be approached, but if he himself is completely innocent, then he has a way of trying to get her to establish her fidelity. And it's a difficult process, and it has to do with erasing Hashem's name. And it has to do with a curse. You can read the verses. And it has to do with how far Hashem is willing to go in the world, even to allow his holy name to be erased, which is a very serious prohibition. But for the sake of peace between husband and wife, he's going to allow that. So before we come in our parsha, going backwards, there's no chronological order in my presentation today. Before we come to that, we have this very unnerving, almost bizarre, very scary section of the sotah, the wayward wife. I can't ignore that. She's obviously messing up my vision of our perfect relationship. It happens. It happens that the communication was not clear enough, the lines were not clear enough, and the expression of total commitment and fidelity was simply not emphasized enough in a relationship. A man doesn't want that with his wife, and Hashem doesn't want that with us. Now the next section in the Torah, famously, following the section of the sotah, is the section of the Nazarite. The Nazarite comes immediately after the law of the jealousies, the suspected wayward wife. And our sages quite famously put this together, and they say, why does the portion of the Nazarites come immediately following the portion of the sotah? Because what is the Nazarite? The Nazarite is a person, and by the way, it could be a female, man or woman, who gets totally scared straight. And the Nazarite says, well, I don't want to end up like this. It's very, very sobering. Seeing the sotah, that's what our sages say. When the Nazarite sees the influence that wine had on the sotah, the Nazarite is like, whoa, I don't ever want to come to that sorry, messed up state. And so the Nazarite swears off wine for a period, not wanting to ever be under that influence. This is on a very simple level, of course. The Nazarite, the idea with the Nazarite is that this person, male or female, is not getting enough way of expressing him or herself as to the extent that they wish to go to prove their fidelity. So yes, on the simple level, the Nazarite, maybe there's a connection, symbolically at least, between the Sota and the Nazarite. This person driven to take a vow of abstention from the excesses of this world, because the excesses of this world, such as wine and the products of grapes that can lead to wine, and excess attention to one's personal appearance, etc., can lead one, God forbid, to a state in which what the Sota is accused of, God forbid, could really be true. Now, this is really something very compelling that we've spoken about over the years. It's very interesting that there are two opposing views about where the Nazarite is holding in God's eyes. Two opposing views as to how we deal with this person and understanding what it is that they've taken upon themselves exactly. And one view would be that this person who took this Nazarite vow of abstention from the permitted things that the world has to offer, those things that you have to be careful about, that you have to be going with a measured step in, those things that are permissive. You have permission for those things. You have permission to drink. You have permission to groom yourself. You have permission to be in this world and enjoy what this world has to offer. But it takes a lot of personal responsibility. So one opinion about the Nazarite is really that this person made a really big mistake. And that's why, at the end of the process of the Nazarite vow, at the completion of the term, the Nazarite brings an offering to Hashem, and part of that offering is considered to be a sin offering. Well, what was the sin? So according to this understanding, the sin is that basically this person said, you know, Hashem made rules. Hashem gave us the Torah. There's plenty of prohibitions in the Torah. There's plenty of rules in the Torah, but that's not good enough for him. That's not strict enough for him. He's got to be super religious, and he's got to even deny himself or herself those things that Hashem himself said, I'm going to let you deal with this and walk the narrow plank of measure and know how to deal with it. But this person, no, this person had to limit himself from what this world has to offer, and that's a sin. Because everything that Hashem put in this world is really for us to find Him in and to enjoy in measure and to serve Him through. But the other opinion is that the Nazarite brings a sin offering because he stops being a Nazarite. He brings this at the completion of his term. And that opinion is much more extreme. And it's like saying, what a shame that once you started to refrain and you started to really get into this period, what a shame that you're stopping. What a shame that you're going back to an ordinary life. And there's no real clarification of which opinion is correct. But on the symbolic level of how this applies to all of us, and how this fits in with a theme that we're all so much a part of this week because it's our wedding. Shavuot, festival of reliving the receiving of the Torah and redoubling our commitment and reaffirming our vows to Hashem. I think the question really is, what is one prepared to do to show fidelity? You know, if the Sota can be seen as a mistake potentially that we all could make, then we all have to prove ourselves. And the Nazir, the Nazarite, you know, it's a driven personality. Someone who really feels, I must at all costs show fidelity. This is serious. This is my life. This is my soulmate. This is a soulmate relationship. The Nazarite says, I don't ever want to be distracted from your presence. I don't ever want there to be grounds for even thinking for a moment that I could be distracted from your presence, from the reality of your being, because there's really nothing else for me. So maybe that seems like an extreme personality, or maybe for each one of us in our own way, it's a thin line. What is a person prepared to do? And here is something to think about for Shavuot. And it's okay if you're seeing this after Shavuot, because the real test is the rest of our lives anyway. What is our reaffirmation of receiving the Torah really all about? Because remember, the key to understanding how the Jewish people celebrate a Chag is not about just some commemoration of something that happened a long time ago. It's an absolute reliving. So make no mistake about it, the challenge that we are being summoned for is to receive the Torah again, to reaffirm our vows, and thus coming this Shabbat to the strange configuration of the Sota and the Nazir and the priestly blessings and the offerings of the heads of all the tribes and the completion of the tabernacle. And our house is a very, very, very fine house. So, what does one have to do to prove to Hashem that we want this to be real? Okay, I received the Torah again this week. Am I going to go back to who I always was and how it always was? Is there going to be room for suspicion? Or am I going to do something to show that we can be above suspicion and literally live happily ever after, as is reflected by the beautiful verses in the book of Hosea, which we actually read this past Shabbat in the Haftorah. I will betroth you to me forever, and I will betroth you to me with righteousness, with justice, with kindness, and with mercy, and I will betroth you to me with fidelity, and you will know Hashem.